Washington Journal continues.
Hawaii Democratic Congressman Ed Case joins us now, a member that represents a district where some 80% of his constituents can trace their heritage to Asia or the Pacific Islands. And Congressman, first explain the significance this week of Congress passing bills to condemn and combat hate crimes against Asian and Pacific Islanders.
Well, first of all, good morning and aloha to everybody listening, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on. This was a very, very important, very moving week. Asian Americans in our country have had a long and incredible history throughout our country of contribution, of sacrifice, of moving the generations forward, of contributing to the overall health and welfare of our country, and yet they have suffered from continuing discrimination, continuing hate, up to and including violence and death. And certainly in my district of Hawaii, as you pointed out, I have the highest Asian American population of any of the 435 congressional districts. At close to 80% of the folks that I represent have their heritage in Asia and the Pacific. And there are many, many around the country who share that heritage. And the fact that we are continuing to see discrimination and hatred and violence against a single community as a result of their ethnicity is absolutely unacceptable in this country. This bill was authored by my colleague, Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, and was passed in the House with my colleague Grace Meng and our Asia Pacific American Caucus. And it's very important not only to set up far stronger mechanisms to both prevent and prosecute these kind of hate crimes, but to send the basic message that this is not okay in this country.
Congressman Ed Case with us this morning. The phone lines, if you want to join the conversation, Democrats 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, Independents 202-748-8002. Congressman Case, speaking of some of your constituents, your tweet from late yesterday saying such a big mahalo to our great Hawaiian National Guard troops who are coming home this weekend after a months-long deployment to help secure Congress. I gave them a personal tour of the Capitol to remember us by. What did you tell them when they asked you why they were here and what happened on January 6th?
Well, we told them that some of our own fellow citizens attacked the Capitol on January 6th with the intention of disrupting the peaceful transition of power, disrupting the democratic process. And it was highly unfortunate that we had to ask them to come to our own U.S. Capitol to help secure a democracy, help secure our ability to govern, and that was tragic in and of itself. Much less the loss of life, the tremendous damage to property on that day, but that we had an obligation collectively to assure that democracy continued, and they were a part of that. This was a different mission. Many of my Hawaii National Guard troops have been deployed overseas to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to the Sinai, to Kosovo throughout the last couple of decades. This was a different assignment, but they understood exactly what it was about, and many of them, although they had been here securing our Capitol, securing Washington, D.C., had not been in the Capitol. They had not actually had the opportunity, and I figured, you know what, if you're going to come and take care of us, I want you to at least see, feel, and understand the history, the solemnity of democracy, the fragility, perhaps, of democracy, and take that home with you as some measure of thanks.
And not to put you on the spot, but what are the two statues that Hawaii has in the Statuary Hall collection? We
have King Kamehameha and Father Damien. Those are two towering figures from our history that we're very, very proud of. And of course, it's always a stop for the folks from Hawaii in front of the King Kamehameha statue, which is the largest and really most imposing statue of any in Statuary Hall. It's very, very moving and emotional to us from Hawaii that the king is here, as well as Father Damien, a true hero in his own right.
You're a member of the Appropriations Committee, a bill on the House floor today as the House finishes up its work before the Memorial Day recess to a supplemental appropriations bill to secure $1.9 billion in funding to secure the Capitol complex. Why do we need another $1.9 billion here?
Well, first of all, I mean, the fact of an incredible attack on our Capitol on January 6th, of course, had its own tragedy, but it also was an incredible extra expenditure of funds on all fronts to address that attack, as well as to secure the Capitol in the months since. So, for example, going back to the National Guard, we mobilized Guard troops from across the country to come to the Capitol and help us secure it. That costs a lot of money. We don't think that that should be borne by the state Guard. So 500 million of that 1.9 billion is to basically reimburse the National Guard troops for their costs. We have many costs by many agencies. One thing that I don't think people always focus on is how many different agencies throughout the government were involved or needed to be involved in terms of the January 6th attack. We had, of course, the FBI, we had the U.S. Capitol Police. We had incredible damage to our Capitol proper that is governed by the architect of the Capitol. We know that our Capitol was not secure in a physical sense. That was obvious from anybody that watched the images on TV, how easily the folks are able to break down doors and windows. And so much of this is just trying to get the Capitol more strengthened and secure. And then we had other agencies, for example, the U.S., not only the U.S. Capitol Police, but the Sergeant at Arms, or the National Park Service, which has a piece of this from the mall perspective, as well as the D.C. Metro Police. So when you actually take all of the expenditures that were required from January 6th and add them up, it does come to a very, very legitimate and large amount of money, and that should be some lesson in and of itself.
Several callers for you already, sir, and we'll start in New Hampshire. Darius is an independent. Is it Ossipee, New Hampshire?
Ossipee.
Ossipee. I'll remember that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So about the Capitol, I didn't see what you seen, and I didn't see an attack on the Capitol. What I seen was a bunch of angry Americans. I seen the Capitol Police letting them in, and my opinion is, if you start fortifying the Capitol, then America's over. But I got something important to say about Israel and Hamas and the Palestinians. What's been going on over there for over 60 years, has supposed to have been stopped taking their land. Stopped taking their land by the international community. All right, they've been taking it for over 50 years. They've been killing them and moving them out. So how can not the Palestinians protect themselves? They don't have a right to defend themselves, and you keep calling them Hamas.
Congressman Case, two issues there.
Well, first of all, as to the Capitol, we do have to find the right balance, and we are trying to find the right balance between legitimately securing our Capitol and allowing it to continue as the open beacon of democracy. Nobody wants to shut the Capitol down so that the public cannot come to the Capitol. It's their building, it's their democracy, it's their process. Nobody is interested in doing that. But the reality of January 6th, and I respectfully disagree, was that our citizens did in fact attack the Capitol. I don't know how you can characterize that in any way, shape, or form other than that. Yes, of course they were angry, but that doesn't excuse an attack on the Capitol and violent disruption of democratic processes and death. And so we have to face some realities here. In fact, many of the issues that arose from January 6th, as I hope will be fully investigated by an independent, nonpartisan commission, such as what we passed yesterday in the House. I hope that they will take a look at what appeared to be an assumption by many of the folks that were responsible for securing our Capitol that wouldn't happen. And of course, that assumption proved to be a great mistake. As to Israel and Palestine, I don't think any of us can disagree with the incredible tragedy there and the frustration that we feel that after 60 years, as you pointed out, we are still where we are here today. And frankly, I'm not going to get into who was more right or more wrong in this particular situation. Israel has a right to defend itself. The Palestinians have a right to live in their own homeland and to be safe and secure, as any of us would want. Hamas does not represent all Palestinians. In fact, it represents a distinct minority of Palestinians. The beef is with Hamas, not with the Palestinian people. And so, frankly, we have to, as an international community, re-engage in this incredibly tragic and yo-yo of a situation there, and try to help both sides to come to some lasting solution.
Georgetown, Texas. This is Bill, a Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. I was calling in response to the conversation this morning, and I think that this insurrection of January the 6th is just that, an insurrection, and the purpose of it is white supremacy. If you look at what's happening with our political situation today, you'll see that the Republican Party is no longer a political organization. By trying to pass laws and other legislation to restrict black and brown voting across the country is one of the main things of political control of black and brown people.
Congressman Case.
Well, I think first of all, I'm not going to indict every single Republican with that label. With respect, sir, I do think that element is in the Republican Party, but I frankly know many colleagues in Congress on the Republican side who do not fit that profile at all. And I believe, obviously, and they feel that element in their party is a tremendous problem, not only to the country, but to their party itself. However, having said that, I also will agree with you that there was, in fact, from all appearances, some element of white supremacy that was participating in the attack on the Capitol, the insurrection, as you put it, on the Capitol on January 6th. And that is, in fact, why we need an independent, bipartisan commission to step up above all of the details that, for example, the U.S. Capitol Police or the FBI or any of the other agencies that are involved, step up above it all, take a broad look and ask ourselves those very, very hard questions. Why did our own citizens do that? How much of it was related to some organized effort by white supremacists who obviously are in our country? How much of it was related to just generic anger that came to a focus and was incited by events? We need those answers. We did this after 9/11. The commission that we passed with bipartisan support, including an outright endorsement by the Problem Solvers Caucus, which I'm a member of, which is 29 Republicans and 29 Democrats committed to pragmatic solutions for our country, is exactly the same model as the post 9/11 attack commission. It's completely bipartisan. It's got its own mandate. And that's why we need to answer the questions that you're raising, because it's not good for the country not to have real, honest answers, as difficult as they may be, and closure about why, so that we can move on together.
Just about 10 minutes left with Congressman Ed Case, the Democrat of Hawaii, a member of the Appropriations Committee, joining us. And you can join us on phone lines for Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. Keep calling in. Congressman, coming back to your work as an appropriator, not your chamber today, but the Senate is taking up a bill, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, to authorize $110 billion for science and technology research programs to compete with China. One of the amendments that's going to be voted on today in the Senate is proposed by the Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Jim Inhofe that would provide dollar-for-dollar parity between increases in defense and non-defense spending. That debate's going to happen on the Senate floor. But just in general, where do you see the right balance between defense and non-defense spending? Should it be a 1-to-1 ratio?
Well, I don't believe in a strict formula, in all honesty. So if it's a direct, 1-to-1 parity proposal, that's not something that I think I can support. It's too arbitrary. It doesn't adjust to circumstances. However, I will also say that we have a very disturbing trend in many parts of our political discussion that I don't believe does recognize the importance of national defense. I don't believe does recognize the reality of China. I live in the Indo-Pacific. I work in the Indo-Pacific. I deal with China every day. If I go home to Honolulu today, which I am going to do, I'm already halfway to China. So I'm closer to, I'm just about equidistant in Honolulu between Washington, D.C. and China. So that's my world. And what China is doing is real. It is a real, long-term, concerted, across-the-board strategy to essentially monopolize that part of the world at least, and I think beyond. And so this is a real threat, and we cannot. I don't buy in to the element of the political discussion, including my own party, who wants to significantly reduce defense spending. As you know, President Biden, in his initial budget proposal to Congress, did propose a significant increase in non-defense spending. He also proposed a smaller increase of about 1.7% in defense spending, but in that he said no to that element in my own party that wanted to reduce defense spending by 10%, which I don't support. And I don't think that our Appropriations Committee supports that either. So the bottom line is, as to the specific proposal of one-on-one, anything, I don't think that's the way to do it, but the concept is there. We have to maintain our defense posture. And by the way, to the underlying bill in the Senate, I completely support that, because one of the realities that folks don't focus on either is China's incredible investment in science and technology. Of course, that's part of President Biden's proposed plans that are before Congress right now, is to do the same thing. So I'm generally supportive of that.
Back to calls. This is Tina, Pell City, Alabama, Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. Representative Case, thank you for taking the mantle of representation.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a question. I watched a free, YouTube live stream during the protest and during the actual gathering January 6th. And as this fellow moved along, went from the Washington Monument, went towards the Capitol, and then I saw other feeds of the people leading that surge into the building. They used a two-word vocabulary that every protester in Seattle, Minnesota, you is the second word. And I'm thinking that is not the Republican gatherings of anybody that I've ever heard, but it is a mark of Antifa.
What were the words that caught your attention, Tina?
The first word begins with F. The second word is you. And when I keep hearing that, and I see these fellows, I think they were masquerading as Republicans, but I think they were there for a purpose.
Congressman Ed Case.
Well, first of all, I would observe that those words are not universal, are not isolated to either of the parties. I mean, unfortunately, they're used across the entire political discourse, including in public nowadays, which is tremendously unfortunate. Look, this is exactly why we need an independent commission. What you say, in all honesty, doesn't ring true to me, but that's not really the issue here. The issue here is that you have a question about this, a question that is being resonated throughout much of this country. Just as are similar questions in other political spectrums. And these questions need to be answered because the American people are owed an answer. Otherwise, these allegations just kind of, bounce around inside our political discourse and frankly poison our political discourse. And so that's the point of this commission, is to answer directly, is what you're saying true or not? I am not defensive about a commission that asks those tough questions, even if they're contrary to what I think happened or why it happened. And so I think all Americans should embrace the idea of a commission that is constituted and led equally by Republicans and Democrats. That's exactly what we did with the 9/11 Commission, and that's why we did it that way, because we owed the American people an answer across the board, and we didn't want that to be a political answer. That remains the gold standard for commissions. Nobody doubted that commission's outcome on the basis of partisan politics. Not then, not today. That's where I want to be as to what happened on January 6th.
Valhalla, New York. John, Democrat, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Aloha.
I'd like to make a comment about Mr. O'Connor and McCarthy about these talks with a double tongue. One minute he says that Trump did create this problem, and he this and that, and now today he's not going to vote. He's telling people not to vote for a thing. Where's he? What's going on with this Republican Party? It's a disgrace.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to try to explain Leader McCarthy's words and actions in any kind of sequence. That's for you to judge. It has been a little circuitous to me. I will say that, and I wish that he had fully endorsed the January 6th commission. I think the Republican Party has a tremendous soul-searching, facing it straight in the face. And by the way, I'm not going to excuse my own party. We have our own questions. We have our own internal discussions. So I'm not presenting this as a partisan, issue. But I'm sitting here observing a party, and I want a two-party system. I think that's good for democracy. I think that's good for government. I think that's good for the American people. I think we should have the great debate of policy and ideas, but it should be always focused on the overall good of the country. It should always be constructed under an assumption that democracy is sound, that elections matter, that systems that we follow are inclusive and not exclusive. And I think what the Republican Party faces is an existential question, which is whether they still buy into that. And I'm sure that there are people out there that would say the same thing of the Democratic Party, and I accept that criticism. The fact is that there's a day of reckoning to be coming in the Republican Party, if it's not already here. We obviously saw that earlier with my colleague, Ms. Cheney, and others. Even yesterday on the vote on the January 6th commission, which was supported by 25 Republicans, that bill came to the floor because Mr. Katko, a Republican, tried to work out an acceptable compromise deal, as he succeeded in doing with the Democratic side. So that's the question for the Republican Party.
What's a hard internal question your party has to reckon with?
Well, certainly we have a couple of hard internal questions that we are trying to sort through right now. I mean, one of them, for example, is the age-old question of the proper role of the federal government. Is it a significantly, substantially ramped up role which comes far more into the lives of American people than anything we've seen, or is it an approach that we have followed? So that's a clear question that we are asking ourselves. We have questions as to our foreign policy that we're sorting through. I've already spoken to that. Should in fact we be investing the same level in the defense of our country, or should we substantially reduce our defense budget and reinvest that elsewhere? Do we care about the federal debt and deficits? That's a major question that I'm facing. I'm the co-chair of the Democratic Blue Dog Coalition, which is a group of about 19 Democrats who believe that debt and deficits do matter, who believe that we have to operate from a fiscally responsible and sustainable base. In all honesty, some of my colleagues in the Democratic Party aren't particularly focused at all on debt and deficits, and so those are questions that we have to answer. But I think the difference here is that we're not questioning the overall construct of our country. We're not questioning democracy. We're accepting that we have disagreements even within our own party, but that there's a system and a process and a structure that is set up for us to reconcile those differences.
Last call for you. This is Tom, has been waiting in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. First of all, sir, I really appreciate your words, and I called on the Republican line because I've been a Republican since 1971. And I will admit I did vote for Trump. However, after seeing that display of behavior on a daily basis, the tweets of a lost election, and then finally seeing what was so horrific on January 6th of our crown jewel being attacked, I immediately went down and registered as a Democrat. Not that I, necessarily support the Democrats, but I will not vote for another Republican. And I kudos to Liz Cheney, the only one that can speak the truth. I am so disgusted with, and I watched that Oscar award-winning performance prior to you coming on by Scott Perry and how he just danced around the issues.
Tom, we're running out of time here. What's your question for the congressman?
My question is not really a question, but I'm there with the Democrats, so that's really what my message is. Congressman
Case, give you the final minute.
You're not alone, sir. There are many, many, many people throughout our country who have been dissatisfied with an absolute presentation of political philosophy by both parties, and are looking for the best answer, the most pragmatic party, the one that can actually deliver results for the American people, because after all, that's what this is about, results for all of the American people, not for any one segment. I'm a Democrat. I'm proud of it. I believe our party can do that, and I welcome you. But we also need to speak to many, many people throughout this country for whom Congress is not a friend, and we need to deliver for them. And I believe that in our Democratic Party we can, in fact, offer that, working where we can with whoever wants to work with us to get that job done.
Congressman Ed Case, Democrat of Hawaii and Appropriations Committee member. Do always appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you so much. Aloha.